Not so long ago, the Penrith Panthers were looking down the barrel of bankruptcy. They were a team that seemed down and out, in need of a rebuild of mass proportions. Stuck in a mediocre situation, primarily outside the finals with a passionate fan base. "2012 was the first full year of the Phil Gould era, with the Penrith Panthers trying to amend past faults by commencing a full-blown rebuild. Gould would claim that the club was in very serious financial trouble, as the club sat in a debt of $110 million. This led to Phil Gould contacting wealthy billionaire James Packer for a loan of $10 million, which was granted. Packer would help Penrith renegotiate themselves out of a tough financial situation with a private equity firm, giving the Panthers 18 months to refinance. The Panthers would sell some of their 14 clubs and eventually got refinanced by the bank, a significant day for the club. The financial instability was also hampering their salary cap. It had been discovered that by 2014, 12 of the 25-player squad would take up all but $600,000 of the salary cap. Origin player and club legend Luke Lewis felt the full brunt of the salary reshuffle as the 200-gamer was moved to the Cronulla Sharks. Another Penrith star in Michael Jennings would also be moved on at season's end, even enduring time in the New South Wales Cup side due to poor performances. It was also clear both Gould and Ivan Cleary were determined to rebuild the club, even if it meant losing in the short term. This was shown in the club's poor performance in the 2012 season, with a record of 8 wins and 16 losses, positioning themselves 15th on the table. This was the club's worst finish in 8 years and highlighted how big of a hole the club was in. The 2013 season would see the influx of plenty of fresh faces. It was out with the old and in with the new. As Jennings, Lewis and Michael Gordon left the club, a host of young prospects and fringe players made up the Penrith Panthers squad. Dean Whare, Lewis Brown and James Roberts were given starting roles and were primed to be a real underdog during the 2013 season. Although, as many predicted, the Panthers would struggle. They would only win 2 of their first 8 matches as this group looked to gel. It was not all gloom for Penrith though, as they did have a couple 3-game win streaks and an impressive 62-6 win over the Warriors. The Panthers were in 7th position after 18 rounds, but an eventual 4-game losing streak would push them out of the 8. Isaac John, David Simmons and Dean Whare were standouts, as most Penrith players were still proud of how the club competed and were keeping their heads high for the following season. So now it's 2014, 3 years into Phil Gould's 5-year plan. By the way, the 5-year plan was created by the media. Anyways, the Panthers started to have something to show for their struggles. A definite focus on experience was clear in their acquisitions, which were headlined by Premiership winner Jamie Soward and former New South Wales representative Peter Wallace. Wallace was appointed co-captain alongside Kevin Kingston as the club looked to mesh the young prospects signed from the previous season and the more experienced signings this season. After 8 rounds, it was still unsure whether this plan was working, as the team's inconsistent play had led to a record of 4 wins and 4 losses. The Panthers needed to take a hold of their season, and did so professionally. Penrith would win 5 games in a row and by Origin time sat tied first in the standings. Well on their way to a minor premiership, the injuries started to mount to key names like Elijah Taylor, Bryce Cartwright, Tyrone Peachey and Peter Wallace. This caused the team to fall in rounds 19 and 20, with critics writing their season off already. Premiership. Ivan Cleary would win Dally M Coach of the Year, highlighting the great work he and the board had done. Jamie Soward's impressive kicking game and game management were especially on show in their qualifying finals matchup against the Sydney Roosters to a try, and the conversion from the sideline by Jamie Soward would set up the last-minute heroics from Soward only a couple minutes later.
Down to 15, that earlier time I gave you was wrong. The kick from Soward! The kick from Soward! It's a goal! It's a goal!
They would lose in the preliminary finals to the Bulldogs. Penrith's New South Wales Cup side were crowned champions. With success in both the NRL and the New South Wales Cup, fans were excited about what the future held for the Penrith Panthers. Now it was 2015 and the fans were expecting the team to repeat the success from the previous season. With wins in round 1 and 2, the team looked set for a strong season. Unfortunately, injuries killed the Panthers' chance at a successful campaign. Key players like Seguiaro, Wallace, Soward and Moylan would not even amass 13 games in the season due to injuries. There was not a position that did not suffer from injury problems throughout the season. The injuries were so destructive that 11 different halves combinations were used, including Apisai Coruscant and Tyrone Peachey. The Panthers did fight well to remain in the top 8 until round 12, but as these injuries began to compile, Penrith would have no chance. Penrith would finish the season in 11th place, only one win away from the wooden spoon. It was a disappointing season to say the least. Fans were expecting at least another finals appearance, and so was the board. This meant that the former Dally M Coach of the Year, Ivan Cleary, was sacked with 1 year left on his contract. This move, conducted by CEO Brian Fletcher and General Manager Phil Gould, was one many didn't see coming. Cleary was expected to run out his contract through the following season, but his performance was deemed inadequate by the club. A combination of poor results and discontent within the club was rumoured to why Ivan Cleary was fired. The acquisition of new coach Anthony Griffin during the 2015-16 off-season was based around his ability to nurture young talent. This was emphasised with the club releasing veterans like Seguiaro, Soward and Lewis Brown in favour of younger players. Griffin's belief in the youngsters was valid, as Penrith's under-20 side had just won the premiership in 2015 and also had won the competition in 2013. His faith in the young core would be repaid as the Panthers had a solid, successful season. The Panthers did start a bit shaky with a 3-5 record, but finished the season on a 5-game winning streak heading into the finals. A key contributor to Penrith's late season success was an 18-year-old in Nathan Cleary, who was given his debut by Griffin. Trent Merrin's consistency was the standout in the Forge during 2016 as well. The Panthers would win their elimination final against the Bulldogs, but fell in the qualifying final against the Raiders. Griffin turned around the club and did what was expected. The real excitement was coming from their state-of-the-art $22 million academy, set to propel the under-20 side, who were runners-up in the 2016 competition, into future stars ready for their shot at first grade. Going into 2017, this now was year 6 for Phil Gould and his alleged 5-year plan, so pundits were expecting a premiership from the club. Griffin went all in with their youngsters pairing of Tamari Martin and Nathan Cleary, but questions were quickly being asked when the team sided with 2 wins and 7 losses. Martin was not meshing with his halves partner and jumped ship, leaving for the Cowboys mid-season. Griffin would also lean on youngsters like Harry Naira, Dylan Edwards and Tyrone May as rookies to perform, and eventually the team started to succeed. Their prop pairing of Campbell Gillard and Tamo gave them some go forward, with the Panthers finishing the season with 11 wins in 15 games. The off-field drama involving Bryce Cartwright would cause him to struggle immensely on the field. Another controversy was with Matt Moylan, Wonga Blake and Peter Hiku involving breaching team protocol after having a night out after a game. Moylan would be dropped for a week and stripped of the captaincy. Murmurs throughout the season that a lack of leadership and underwhelming work ethic from Moylan had put him on the club's bad side. The Panthers would finish the season in 6th place, beating the Dragons in an elimination final, only to lose to the Broncos the next week. Fans were disappointed, they expected more, and so did the board, which led to a huge swap deal. The swap deal had the Panthers looking good for 2018, with the proven champion James Maloney swapping with Matt Moylan. Nathan Cleary had just come off a monster year, and Maloney's guidance was predicted to propel the club even further. 20% of their 2012 side was homegrown, whilst in 2018 the homegrown depth had expanded to 80% of the club's roster. A pretty extraordinary result and a real testament to the infrastructure and system that has been put in place at the Penrith Panthers. As mentioned earlier, the club has incredibly successful youth sides, and these guys were now transitioning into the first grade. Players involved in both the 2013 and 2015 Holden Cup winning sides like Campbell Gillard, Isaiah Yeo, Tyrone May, Dylan Edwards, Moses Leota and James Fisher-Harris were living examples of how successful Penrith's youth system had become. The team was playing solid, but this was not enough for the Panthers' dedicated fan base. This was a team that was overdue for a premiership, and by round 20, Phil Gould decided to terminate the contract of Anthony Griffin. The risk was enormous for the club as they were in the top 4, but the poor relationship between the players and Griffin, as well as a falling out with Phil Gould and Griffin, were pinpointed as keys to the dismissal. Gould and Griffin built a bitter feud, publicly criticising each other. Phil Gould was quoted saying they wouldn't have won a premiership if he was coaching. Gould would promote Cameron Ciraldo as the interim head coach, with the team ending the season inconsistently placing 5th. A win in the elimination final against the New Zealand Warriors would set up the qualifying final against the Cronulla Sharks. Penrith almost pulled off a remarkable comeback. Down 18-2 at halftime, they would storm back to level the score at 20-20 before a Chad Townsend field goal sent them home. The 2018-19 off-season is where things heated up. the Penrith board had come to a decision that Serrano was not who they wanted to lead the club, and a search for a new coach was on. Rumours began to swirl about a reunion with Ivan Cleary, even though he had 2 years left in his contract with the West Tigers. Phil Gould, the club's general manager, was not involved in this recruiting as he decided to fire Cleary in 2015. The members of the board, including CEO Brian Fletcher and Chairman David O'Neill, were going behind Gould's back to get Cleary. This aggressive approach paid off as Nathan Cleary would be released by the West Tigers and signed to a 3-year deal with the Penrith Panthers. "2019 marked Ivan's redemption year, a year to prove why he should have not been fired in his first stint as coach. A full preseason was behind them, and the Panthers were ready to go until they were rocked. On March 7th, 2 weeks before the season started, Penrith Panthers player Tyrone May would be exposed for a sex tape scandal that ruled him out for the remainder of the season. May would admit to these charges and was indefinitely suspended. This scandal would disrupt the club significantly, with former NRL great Laurie Daly claiming he would not let his son play for the club, and Phil Gould reportedly in tears over the matter, feeling let down by his club. This drama, combined with his significantly reduced role at the club, caused Phil Gould to leave the Penrith Panthers 6 rounds into the season.
But I think the time is right now, and I think the club's in a really good position, and I think I'm in a good position at the moment.
Although a dramatic ending to his tenure, Phil Gould is certainly remembered for his efforts that saved the club. With all this going on, Penrith fans were hoping that performances on the field would start to become the focus. In some aspects they did. Penrith's performances did make everyone forget about their tumultuous off-season, although not for the right reasons. Penrith would start their season with a record of 2 wins and 8 losses, sitting at the bottom of the NRL table. This is where Ivan Cleary was heavily criticised as pundits began to claim the firing of Griffin was unnecessary the year prior. The partnership of Nathan Cleary and James Maloney was awful as well, as they seemed to have no chemistry and lacked any sort of offensive creativity. Luckily, the Panthers would win 7 games in a row, bringing them back into finals contention. This momentum did fizzle out though in the final 6 rounds, as they finished 10th on the ladder. The only real highlight from this season were rookies like Brian To'o, Brent Naden and Liam Martin, who were showing exceptional promise. Viliami Kikau and Fisher Harris were the club's best in an otherwise terrible season. In 2020, Penrith made an emphasis on getting rid of high-salary players, and players that weren't needed on the roster. 12 players would be offloaded, including key starters like James Maloney, Wanga Blake and Regan Campbell-Gillard. The one signed player was Apisai Coruscant from the Manly Seagulls, who went under many radars. 2020 was considered Ivan Cleary's last chance at a premiership as his days began to be numbered. The Panthers would calm many fans' nerves as the team started with 2 wins before COVID-19 halted play. The Panthers would return to action and produce one of the most unbelievable seasons the NRL has ever seen. After a loss in round 5, the Panthers would win 15 games in a row, finishing the season with a record of 18 wins, 1 draw and 1 loss. Week after week, Penrith dismantled their opponents. They were playing confident, free-flowing footy and became favourites for neutral fans. The new explosive offense was attributed to the hiring of assistant coach Trent Barrett and the focus of Nathan Cleary being the out-and-out playmaker. Penrith finished the season as the minor premiers with the best point differential and the best defence in the NRL. Their Week 1 finals matchup was against back-to-back champions, the Sydney Roosters. In an incredibly tight game that involved back and forth scoring, a Cleary field goal would edge Penrith a 29-28 win and a spot in the preliminary final. They would face the Rabbitohs in the preliminary final in a close matchup, where they'd pull out the victory by just 4 points. This meant only 1 game stood between Penrith and the premiership. This is a team that was built from within, a team where 13 players this Sunday will realise their grand final dream with their debut club. Parallels have already been made with that 2003 Penrith Panthers premiership side. Youngsters like Stephen Crichton, Liam Martin and Jerome Luai have expertly meshed with experienced old hands like James Tamou, Apisai Coruscant and Josh Mansour. The 9-year vision held collectively by Phil Gould, Ivan Cleary and board members has been realised. Now only 80 minutes of grand final footy stand between the Penrith Panthers and becoming NRL champions.